Assalamualaikum and salam sejahtera. Welcome to topic 6 with the title of feeding. Before I proceed, let us look at the learning outcomes of this topic. At the end of this topic, you should be able to identify feeding strategies, explain types of food for aquarium fish, understand feeding the fry. Before you decide on types of food to be given to your fish, you have to know your fish, observe the mouth of the fish, know the types of fish, whether they are carnivores, omnivores, or herbivores, and know their eating methods, whether they are top feeding, middle feeding, bottom feeding, or grazers. Aquarium fish feed is plant or animal material intended for consumption by pet fish kept in aquariums or ponds. Fish foods contain macronutrients, trace elements, and vitamins necessary to keep captive fish in good health. Approximately 80% of fish keeping hobbyists feed their fish exclusively prepared foods that most commonly are produced in flake, pellet, or tablet form. Some fish foods also contain additives such as sex hormones or beta-carotene to artificially enhance the color of ornamental fish. Prepared foods are those foods that are non-living and are made by the aquarist or bought already prepared for consumption for fish, such as dry foods, vacation food, medicated fish food, freeze-dried and frozen fish diet, and frozen fish food. Flake food is a type of artificially manufactured fish food. It is ideally suited to the top dwellers, midwater fish, and even bottom dwelling species. Flake food is baked to remove moisture, ensuring a longer shelf life. Dry foods are also available as pellet, stick, tablet, granules, and wafers. Manufactured to float or sink depending on the species to feed. Next, we have gel foods. Gel foods are typically made of the same ingredients that dry food is made of, only with fewer preservatives. It is bound by carob bean gum, agar-agar, or gelatin. Some are sold frozen, some room temperature, and others are a dry powder you mix with water. This type of food has a higher shelf life than flake food. When frozen, it can stand up to 6 months. Have you heard vacation food before? Vacation foods, also known as vacation blocks or weekend blocks for smaller versions, are designed to be placed inside the aquarium to forego feeding while the owner is absent. These blocks release small amounts of food as they dissolve. Food blocks can be a good choice for smaller tropical fish, but can pollute the water if the tank is neglected for too long. Next is medicated fish food. Medicated fish food is a safe and effective method to deliver medication to fish. One advantage is that medicated food does not contaminate the aquatic environment, does not negatively affect fish, filtration, and algae growth in the aquarium. The parasites will get treated spot on by medicated food because the fish is ingesting it. Move on to the next type of food. Freeze-dried fish foods have only a single animal ingredient each. These include tubifex worms, mosquito larvae, bloodworms, butterflies, along with brine shrimp. Almost all organisms that are freeze-dried can be found as either living or frozen foods. But in the freeze-dried form, they provide a convenience of storing and feeding that frozen or living food cannot match. Most aquarium stores have freezers with frozen fish foods. These include various mollusks, fish, crustaceans, aquatic insects, and beef heart. Most of them you can make yourself with a food processor, but Frozen adult brine shrimp and bloodworms are more difficult to come by and could be considered for purchase at the pet store. Next, we have vegetable diets. Many fish require vegetable diets. Most notable for requiring vegetables are the plecos, algae-eating catfish, silver dollars, and ambuna. These fishes have extraordinarily long guts and will develop lower digestive problems if they do not get enough raw fish in their diets. Not to be forgotten is live fish food. Live fish food include earthworms, sludge worms, water fleas, bloodworms, brine shrimp, and feeder fish. Next type of food is called homemade foods. Homemade food may be the best option for many fish keepers. However, it can also lead to deficiencies if you are not educated on fish nutrition. Most homemade food is a mix of fresh or frozen ingredients held together with a binder, typically gelatin or agar-agar. Now, let's move on to feeding strategies. Characteristic of fish foods. Most of fish have powerful sensory characters. If the flavor and odor of food is not good, they reject of feeding. The characteristic of food is very important, especially for bottom feeders. Flavor and taste, sound, smell, color, and buoyancy of food are the main factor influence in feeding of ornamental fishes. First, flavor and taste. Smell can be detected by the specific anatomical receptors in fish, but flavor has to be dissolved in water for the fish to locate it. Some fish have receptors in their mouth or on the head or lips. Some even have taste receptors on their skin. These receptors carry message to the brain and tell the fish to swim towards the food. Fish are governed by olfactory senses and to a certain extent taste buds. The food should be available and good flavor and good taste for fish. Otherwise, even it nutritionally will be superior, but it is useless if it is far from the use of fish. Second is sound. Through water, sound travels about 4 times faster than it does through air. So, a fish can actually hear sound through the vibrations that take place in water. By picking up these vibrations in water, the fish become aware of the feeding frenzies that cause many fish to conglomerate when the feeding begins. Also, there are fishes that are so used to a routine in their feeding that they start grouping when they hear sounds that normally precede feeding. Third is smell. Fish meal manufacture is often associated with a characteristic of smell. The smell comes over the meal and carries away vapors. The sense of smell is highly developed in fish. Fish needs to be able to identify their food and their mates through the sense of smell. So, many fish species have nostrils that help them to identify the various things they come across. These sensors thus help the fishes to zero in on their food. Next is color and buoyancy of food. Fish meal has a yellow-brown rosette of white or dusty color and few are white colors. Fish meal has slightly differences in appearances and smells according to its type. The moisture should be within 10% to ensure its storage and use safely. The buoyancy of fish meal depends on the fish in aquarium. Like farm fish, some aquarium fish are surface feeders, midwater or bottom feeders. Bottom feeder and most of tropical fish prefer to take the food when it sinks to the bottom. The smell of fish meal should be fresh. Bear in mind that the choice to feed your ornamental stock with live food instead of dry manufactured feed is mainly determined by the growth stage of the fish. A newly hatched fish desires food of a very small size due to their jaw size and the immaturity of the digestive system during the early stages of life. Live foods such as brine shrimp and mosquito larvae that are readily absorbent meet these requirements and provide the high protein needs of larvae. Another important feeding strategy is schedule fish feeding properly, as overfeeding is the most common mistake fish owners make. If you overfish the food, they will usually gobble it up even if they are not starving. Most fish do quite well on one feeding per day. However, some owners prefer to feed their fish twice a day. The key is to keep each feeding very small. The timing is not critical, with the exception of nocturnal feedings that should be fed just before turning the lights out at night. In terms of the amount of food, a good rule of thumb is to give your fish no more than they will consume in less than 5 minutes. When in doubt, underfeed, you can always give them another small feeding if necessary. The type of food is just as important as the amount. Remember, do not overfeed your fish, as the effects may not be apparent at first. There are other health concerns associated with overfeeding. Some fish species develop a fatty liver disease. Overfeeding can also stress fish and cause them to suffer from fin rot. More often, the negative effects on the aquatic environment itself will affect the health of your fish. Generally, after a fish hatches or a fish gives birth, they have a yolk sac which will be absorbed in approximately 2 to 3 days. After the yolk has fully absorbed, live food can be given. Live foods are highly nutritious sources of micro and macronutrients, vitamins, fats, proteins, and carbohydrates, and contribute significantly to increased growth rate. The use of live food stimulates the natural eating environment for captive aquatic life, making the stock more vibrant and colorful. Furthermore, live food is an excellent conditioning agent for broodstock. Its high nutrient concentration encourages spawning activities, hence increasing your breeding success rates. Well done! We have covered topic 6. But before we end our topic, let us recap on the subtopics that we had learned. We learned on the first, various types of aquarium foods. Second, feeding strategies. And the third one, feeding fry. With that, thank you for your attention.